think one of the big things for me has been realizing how many of the thoughts we have and feelings we have were actually defined by other people and other systems of perception, meaning we have thoughts that we now think are our own that really were handed down generationally through our family or through political systems or through economic systems. We have capitalist fantasies that they're really not innate, in the sense that, like, as parents, we know that when you meet your child and you get to usher them through those first few years, they don't think in that way. Those are things that come later, you know? And so for me, it's kind of a process of, I'm making this record at the moment, just finishing it. It's called Freedom, Love, and the Recuperation of the Human Mind, because I really see the process of living as about recuperating our original mind back. You know, it gets lost. It gets taken by all these systems, by religions, and we sort of have to win our minds back to actually think for ourselves and realize wow, I'm working for all of these goals and all of these fantasies that really have nothing to do with who I am. They're really other people's definitions of success and stuff.
Yeah, almost
But what an important starting place to bring this to the context of parenting, because I think that this is part of the challenge. It's part of the reason I always say, my own personal opinion, that people generally shouldn't get married until they're at least 30. Because I think unless we've been through some extraordinary guidance or circumstances, we don't begin to know ourselves and go through that process of, what is my own and what has been acquired or what has been imprinted on me by my family, by society, and so on. And then secondarily, don't rush to get married and start having children, because we are just not as well equipped as we could be if we do some of the work that we're talking about you having done, and I think all of us in this room have been working on. So I think my question is, as a parent, how do you take what you've discovered about yourself, about fame, about success, and about all of this thoughts that aren't our own? How do you take that into being a parent?
Well, I think there's a couple things. In order to adequately respond to a challenge, whether that's raising children or being an artist or whatever we're trying to do, we have to be very in reality, about what the challenge is. Same with, I always think now with environmental issues, we have to really look at it, look at the data. If we're going to solve the problem, we have to understand what's happening. It doesn't mean get depressed about it, but be totally in reality. And this is kind of the bad news portion of anything we're trying to do in life, in that it's not good. The situation's not good. It's not good psychologically in terms of each of us. The damage that has been done to our psyches by being a member of this society that's gone so crazy. It's not that good for our kids in the sense of what is the human journey. Whatever it was 3,000 years ago, the Buddha said, life is suffering. You've basically brought someone into this world who is going to suffer. It's not good. It's not a good situation. So you got to get out of fantasy about it and imagining this, I'm going to be the perfect parent and raise a child that never feels any pain and that just all their creativity just flows out of them. And it's not going to happen. That is not the world that we live in. This is a world in which the ego doesn't just dominate us individually, but it dominates us as a society. And it's very, very difficult to try and liberate ourselves from. So for me, that's really crucial, not to be in sort of a fairy wonderland fantasy about what this world is. So from that space, well, what does it mean? Okay, whether it's karmic or my own desires or nature, biological imperative, I've become a parent. Too late to go back on that. Here we go. I'm in this situation.
We're in it.
I think for most of us, we feel like this snowball effect, and I think it really is karmic in that you've got to work through it. And that's why I'm sort of reluctant I don't look at it as all good or all bad. When people say parenting is the best thing that will ever happen to you, I think there's a lot of fantasy in that,
Agreed.
And just I think when I see monks or people that are ascetics and who just say I'm not going to bring a child into this world. Again, there's a level of trying to buffer themselves from reality. So here we are. We got these kids, right? So how do we usher them through this experience? I really like the word steward because I don't believe it's an important precept for me to realize that it's actually not our job to tell our child the perfect way to manifest their destiny, because I don't think we know. We actually don't know what our kid's destiny is.
Right.
That's something that can only come from that stroke of genius within them, from God, from their higher self, intuition. And so I think that's really important, because a lot of us feel inadequate in the sense of our own level of self-realization. I'm so unrealized. I'm so dominated by ego. I'm so competitive with my peers. I'm so driven by these sort of materialist concerns. How can I possibly teach my child?
Sure.
You just nailed it on the head there.
And you don't have to be able to teach them you just have to try and hand them over to their internal wisdom. And so that's how I kind of see the job of being a parent. So I think I'm on an exploratory journey with my kids. I can hopefully, it's like a garden or something, I wouldn't be the first person to compare that, but it's like, we're not in control of nature. Like, there are going to be forces that are way outside our realm of expertise or experience. But I look at it in terms of how can I contribute to my child actually being able to listen internally to their guidance so that they can fulfill whatever their mission is on a person, whether or not you have a quote unquote spiritual. I think that's another word that is it's become almost, it's got so much baggage, spirituality, because people think, it means you have to be sitting with your legs crossed and praying and eating vegan food and doing yoga, whatever these things are. Whereas, to be concerned with spirit is really just to be concerned with something beyond the material world, however you view that. And that, I know staunch atheists that deeply follow their intuitive guidance with how to live their life. They don't just do what science tells them to do. They have a hunch and they follow it. So I think whether they call that spirituality or not, that's spirituality, So that's kind of what I mean, is that take the baggage off what it means to introduce spirituality to your kid and start really living it with them.
Well, and I think that that's key, and we've talked a lot here about the power of modeling certain behaviors. I say very frequently here how important it is for us to allow our children to see us struggle, to see us make mistakes, so that we give them permission to do the same and to see us move through the struggle and come out on the other side so that they can see that it's okay to struggle and come out on the other side, that in fact there are internal muscles that are in fact awakened because of the struggle that we go through. But I don't know, I think that a lot of parents get so afraid, and there's a lot of parent shaming in our society, that we think we are supposed to always present as though we know how to do it. We're always going to do it correctly. We can't admit that we've made a mistake. And that puts a lot of pressure on parents, and they sort of shut down and end up limiting their children instead of actually expanding the potential.
And even with your kids, I apologize to my kids often. When they criticize me, and that can even happen. Yesterday, Goldie, my little girl, was saying goodbye to her friends that are moving to France for a year. And she said, "You didn't tell me that was going to be the last time I was going to see them." And she was crying. And I said, "I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry I wasn't clear about that." It wasn't a big deal. It's just, it struck me that the trust we're building as peers, and I don't mean you have to be best friends with your kids, but truly, aside from the role you're playing in a family, you're both just individuals trying to work out how to live in this strange mystery of a universe.
Yes,
and you
right.
can just say, as a brother, I kind of look at my kids as we're also brothers and sisters.
We're co-humans.
We're humans that are equally confused. And I just say, "Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right about that." And I can see there's a trust that's building up through. And truly, if you ask me about what is spirituality, really, I really believe it's the ability to examine yourself and see your mistakes and your hypocrisy and then to rectify it. That's it. It's take the rest out of it.
Yep.
And when I see that, that's what I want to model. I want my kids to be able to say, "Hey, I think you made a mistake with that." And I'm not going to jump and automatically say, "Yes, I did." I'm going to think about it. And I'm going to see from their side. And if I think I made a mistake, I'm going to say, "Sorry, I won't do that again." That's how to model a spiritual path.
I had a moment that exactly about what you're talking about in the last 24 hours with my son. It was the classic moment, father-son, butting heads. It got heated. Things were said. I was watching my tongue to not lead the conversation down the road of any shaming or anything like that. Like, I've gotten way better with just not going, for the throat, because you're like, hey, he's a 12-year-old. And I always say something, Ben, that I always say to my kids, and I've said this in the house, and it's totally true. I'll say, hey, man, check it out. It's my first time being a dad. It's my first time being 50. It's my first time doing this, and it's your first time being 12, and it's your first time being 15. So, guys, let's we're both learning.
Some compassion.
Yeah, I'm like, we're all learning. And my wife said to me once, she said, write that down. That you're so right. Like, she's like, that's the best thing I've ever heard you say. Because I said to the household, this is my first time being a dad, guys, and it's your first time being kids. It's our first time being a family. And that kind of corralled everyone in, and like, oh, I can learn too. Like, I can learn from them. They can learn from me. But the moment that I had with my son was, and it's the ego. It's it's what I carry with me as being a father. You will not disrespect me. You will not talk that way to me. Where does that come from? That comes from generations and generations of Italian men in my family, and that's a trigger for me. And we were there, and it got heated. He said something to me that was like, wow, how dare you? But I caught myself. I said, we're going to talk about that later. You go on your way. I'm going to go on my way. We need a break for a second. We got together this morning, and I could tell he was embarrassed at what he had said, and basically, and I, as a dad, I was like, I literally said, I go, bro, come on, I get it. You're embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. That was lame, but check it out. Like, I'll tell you right now, let's just hug, put that behind us, no hangover. And he looks at me, and he gets up, and he started smiling, and then we hugged. And we started the morning. And immediately his mood changed, and we went back to
Joseph. I love that. Really, it's making me feel like, it's that touches my heart.
I just didn't know, but I'll be honest with you. When with what Ben was saying, there is all of that baggage that we carry. Where there was a voice in my head, I'll be honest, that says, "You're letting him off too easy, bro. You're letting, you need to, you can't, you need to." And then there was a part of me, I was like, no, because in our household, at our house, we are not afraid to apologize to each other. We're not afraid to say sorry. I say sorry to the kids. Like, hey, man, sorry. I totally blew it right there. I've said that. My wife has said that. So that upbringing that we, like you said, the brother and sister analogy, the brothers and sisters in this big family, I can really identify with that.
And something else I think that's interesting that I've kind of experienced a lot in music and business and with the oils and different things is that essentially there's a sales experience that you're having with your children. If you're kind of like, hey, if I think I've figured out a couple things, I want to impart that to you. But what you actually want is you want the kid to choose in. You don't want them to be forced into, like, because anyone can discipline anyone else into just forcing them to adapt to their, with enough, just domination, basically. And so I think part of what gets lost is that there also has to be kind of like a seduction into intelligent thinking, and that you want to demonstrate that intelligent thinking has a power that should be chosen, and not punish your kid for choosing an easy way out of something. But so yeah, I look at it in terms of like one of the things I've said to my little girl since she was really little was some of the things that I tell you, you're going to hear things that are totally the opposite out in the world. And you're going to have to decide whether you want to take my advice on it or you want to take your peers' advice about it, because that's what's going to happen. And my ideas, a lot of them are kind of unfashionable. They go against the grain, But I just want you to know you actually do have a choice. Because what happens a lot of the time is that the system itself, culture, views on sexuality, on language, on being cool, and all these things, it's like we automatically think, oh, the system's telling me it must be right. I'd better adapt. I'd better start trying. I'm just saying, I just want you to think for yourself. But I'm here to present to you a counter argument than what you're going to get out in the world. And I want you to choose it, if you want to because it's the more intelligent choice, not because I'm forcing it on you.
Right, which is essential. And again, we've talked here about how the home is like the practice ground. And I've always said it's in my book. I'm like, if you are going to be an authoritarian and you're going to raise your children because of fear of consequence, or just because I'm your mother, or father, then you will just ultimately be replaced by other authority figures unless you create space where your son or daughter can practice what it looks like and what it feels like to challenge the quote-unquote authority of the household and have intelligent conversation and exploration around that. They're going to go out into the world without those tools.
Absolutely. And look at even the education system, how, I saw someone posted on Facebook the other day about how entrepreneurialism, say, is basically discouraged within the education system. What the education produces is workers. Mm-hmm. People that
that's where the bell
comes. That's
what it was designed for. The bell. That was for the factory.
Yes, exactly.
You come, you go, you shuffle down here, you go to lunch, you get a smoke break, and then you're out of here.
That's right.
There's no teaching about real finances. There's no teaching around
critical thinking.
None of that. They don't, because it wasn't designed. It was designed. Hey, the people are going to have the money on top, and that everyone's going to work for you.
That's right. Exactly. And so it's kind of like when I was growing up, I had a lot of ideas. Just little business ideas. Like I remember people really liked. What candy was it? I forget what the name of the candy was, but people really liked it at our school. And there was a corner store that sold them for 35 cents. And I went and bought Nerds. Those candies, Nerds, 35 cents. And then I would bring them to school and sell them for $2. And it was very honest in that everyone knew they were 35 cents. It wasn't like I was just like, it was supply and demand. I was like, none of you guys brought it to school.
Yeah, you're providing a service of doing the legwork.
Right. And now, what infrastructure was there within the educational experience for, I think I was actually displaying something that should have been encouraged, whereas the principal called me and he actually did say, very entrepreneurial, but you can't do that. And I understood why within that current structure you couldn't. But all of this is to bring it back to how do we actually encourage our children to think? Mm-hmm. Because if we just have them mimic us because we've dominated their minds, or our religion has dominated their ability to actually have their own spiritual insights, or their school system has dominated their minds to, not think outside a certain box, they're really losing their creativity, which is where I look at it as the problems we have in the world today, we actually need leaps of logic that are only going to be those moments of genius that are only going to come through people that are thinking outside the box. Well, if we think inside the box, we're just going to continue depleting the environment. So I want my children to be solution providers and to come up with ideas. Mm-hmm. So I need them to be thinking. I don't want them to just follow mandates.
Yeah, and I think also, the way that I think of it is raising our children to see themselves as being co-creators, which is, when you said 10 minutes ago or whatever about the reality, of the world that we've created. I always say that taking responsibility, which so many of us are so resistant to doing because we've equated taking responsibility with acknowledging we've done something wrong instead of taking responsibility being this ultimate act of empowerment, because we say, oh, okay, so if I'm responsible, that means I had a hand in creating this current reality. Therefore, I can also have a hand in creating a different reality. And if we don't teach our children that, then they just feel like they are, subjects. They're recipients of what just self-evidently exists, which of course is not the case.
That's right. Exactly. And by the same token, I think guiding them towards perennial truths about human nature not in a forceful way, but because they're true.
Okay, such as?
So one of them is to do with the nature of kindness. Mm-hmm. This is something that it's not just meant to be like a Southern respect or manners thing, but you can actually achieve more by being kind. Mm-hmm. It's actually a better governing principle. Mm-hmm. You were talking about as your business, that complimenting the people that work for you at your record label, you actually get more productivity out of it. So for instance, that's a very, material way of sort of almost quantifying it. But the principle is that kindness is a powerful principle. Another one to me is, and you were talking about swearing, but the sacred nature of language. Anyone who loves songs loves poetry, understands that the word is powerful. In Hinduism, they say the nature of God is Om. It's a sound. In Christianity, they say in the beginning was the word.
Yes.
There's an idea that like every word you say matters. Now, I'm not going to tell my kid what words to come out, but consider it. Consider you are creating your life with the words you use. This is a really important principle. Another one is to do with sexuality. Again, not to tell your kid exactly how to govern their sexual life, but to say, this is your creative energy. It's not an accident. Like this world would not exist without sexuality. If you look at what marketers do to draw our attention towards something, they use sexuality. I said this to my daughter. We were driving along and there was a billboard with a woman in a bikini or something.
For the boots.
Yeah, for the boots. Exactly.
I always trip on that.
Joseph has seen it too. What is it? I have
It's been going on in Hollywood forever.
Right?
And it's this woman in a bikini and she's, kind of sitting or laying there and she has these big boots on and it's for like the boot warehouse.
That's right. And now that's right. And the example, I actually pointed it out to my daughter and I said, hey, Goldie, so where am I driving you right now? And she said, you're driving to my friend's house for a play date. I said, okay, right. So I'm trying to get somewhere. And who do I love? Who am I married to? And she said, Mama. I said, okay, so how is that helping me right now? What we're seeing, like, what's that trying to do? And she didn't answer. I said, it's trying to distract me.
Yeah.
This is nothing to do. This is actually someone using sexual energy to try and take me off my game, basically, of what, it's a real... And I said, this is the nature of, in this world, people use sex for, like, silly reasons, basically, not respecting how powerful it is. So this is another, like, universal principle that I think we can just teach our kids that, again, without being dictatorial, but telling them, hey, the word's powerful. Sex, powerful. Kindness, powerful. Treat them, to tell them those things are powerful and to just to think about them. Again, like, don't tell them what to think, tell them how to think, like that they can think.
Right. And I think also,
concepts.
I think you're also tapping into the notion of feeling, of being, I always say, how does it feel in your heart?
Right.
Or even when I ask about something that one of my girls want to do, I say, like, I'll go to Happy Feet. What's your heart song? What feels like when you're doing it, you just feel alive? Like everything inside you is just on. It's lit up. That's a guide. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to do for your whole life. And I've got a 20-year-old, right? Yeah. So this is a big topic in our house right now. And I'm just like, this is your time to explore. What are the things that make your heart sing? What are the things that when you do something for another person, you demonstrate compassion or kindness? How does that feel to you? Because it's like a dance or an exchange of energy that's really beautiful. But if we don't bring attention to those things, then they become inundated with the thing that does, to the point of the billboard, that exists everywhere, right? That, Chomsky calls weapons of mass distraction, or that, just are part of mainstream media that's just everywhere and taking space in our brains and our hearts so that there isn't room for these other brain prompts and heart prompts that we can offer as parents.
I love the analogy you use. It's just that's a distraction. Those elements of society are full on distraction. And I love how you say from you being on your game and from you getting from point A to point B. And in this example, it was the woman in the boots, which was it on Melrose?
I've seen there's a few of them around, but it's really it's a great example because look how funny that we've both noticed that this form of manipulation, and it exists in all areas. It's interesting because take out the sexual element, but this idea of manipulation and distraction, and like you see it in both political narratives that are being played out not obviously there's more than two, but the two major political narratives being played out. There's this idea that, like, if we actually think for ourselves, if we're not being told what to feel, what to be attracted to, pick a side with it, that I truly believe, like, we are dangerous to the system when we begin to think for ourselves.
Well, do you ever feel that you do not have enough time in the day to do what you're supposed to get done? You're going to work, you're maybe trying to hit the gym, but you forgot that, I got to pick so-and-so up from daycare. I got to get my dad over to his doctor's appointment. I wanted to pick up the house before I left. Wow, check it out. How am I going to get everything done? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. Go to care.com. Care.com. Care.com is the world's largest digital marketplace for finding and managing family care. That is right. Family care needs can be unpredictable. You got sick kids, you need someone to stay home. Man, both parents are out there trying to make a living. Your kids get sick. Oh, who's going to stay home? Who's going to miss out on that cash? Now you go to care.com and they'll have someone for you that can look after your kids. Don't stress your life away. Seriously, most working parents worry about their kids every minute of the day. You're more at ease and more focused when you know your kids or your parents or even your pets are well cared for. Best part is this, care.com provides access to a variety of background check options you can purchase to help make sure that you're making the best hiring decision. That's my favorite part right there. They're letting you know there's a million different things for you to check out on the background check options so you know who's going to be there with your kids or with your parents or with your pet taking care of the situation. Care.com. Check it out now. If you go to care.com right now, you ready for this? To save 30% off care.com premium membership, visit care.com/rad parenting when you subscribe, and you're going to get 30% off. Like I said, the world's moving a million miles an hour. You just want to take care of your kids and all the responsibilities. Let care.com help.
Yes,
when you brought all that up
absolutely.
about the thinking and the free thinking, I remember years ago, I went and saw, with my wife, we went to see Alfie Cohen speak. And the first thing, he gets up there and it was right around the time the Race to Nowhere came out, and he was
the homework.
Yeah. And he was talking. It was great. It was great to listen to him speak. And I know right now the listeners are like, Joe Sid went and saw Alfie Cohen. Just so you know, that was like the only dude I've ever went. Like I was like, well, so it's not like that's me rolling around on a Thursday night. But the thing I loved about the way he opened his talk was he totally nailed everything you just said. He said, hey, I want to ask you guys questions. And he had this board out there. Give me some ideas of how you want your kids to be. Because all of us had like our 4 and 5, 5-year-old and 6-year-olds. And it was like free thinker, individual, doesn't follow what everyone else does. And he put that all down there. And then he went right into a conversation. But at home, are you like that? You just said you want them to be free thinking. They talk back to you. You want them to be an individual. They want to go to school in rubber boots and a pink dress. And it was like everyone in the room was like, wow, I want them to be this person that's going to choose their own path. But when push comes to shove, if it doesn't agree with what I want as a parent, then I don't want them to do it. And I remember that changed terrified. And I really do believe.
And I think we need to address that. And maybe Ben, you can speak to this. But I think that what I see in parents, and I've definitely faced it myself, is, here's what I can see. Here's what I believe my children would benefit from. But I can't raise them in a bubble. And when I send them out into the world, and we did a show a couple weeks ago about, this mom called us or emailed us about her son or 5-year-old little boy wanting to have pink nail polish or any kind of nail polish. And she was like, I totally want to let him do this. I don't want to limit his, emotional freedom, his psychological freedom. But I'm afraid that if I send him to school like this, he's going to face a ridicule that he's not equipped to face. What do I do?
Okay. So, this is a really interesting subject because I think we have to also discern the difference between thinking for yourself, being a rebellious thinker, and latching onto signifiers of rebellion. To do with the way we dress, the way we speak, the way we wear our hair. None of those indicate free thought. They're all other systems that have just come in that we're conforming to. Even children conform to it. And I don't think we should underestimate how early those systems convince our children that this is the way to rebel or this is the way. And this is why having a psychological or a spiritual perspective on, actually valuing the way we think as opposed to just the actions we take is really, really important. Because what you don't want to do is raise a kid who actually believes that they are not conforming by the way they paint their nails. Because it's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. In a way, I kind of think that, I would like to raise happy, law-abiding citizens who are radical thinkers. I don't want to raise people that just think, oh, I'm going to put a piercing here and that means I'm a rebel. Because how's that going to like solve the climate crisis?
So you're saying that that's still playing on the surface. So maybe that when a teenager or whomever is taking those acts, my guess would be that there's something deeper inside them that's saying something about this doesn't work for me and I don't want to be a part of it. But we don't have the tools to know, well, maybe I could actually do this, or I could work on some level of contemplation where there would be an internal shift. Instead, I'm just going to demonstrate that I'm setting myself slightly apart from the mainstream by making this act of whatever, piercing.
Yeah. And look,
nails.
we all did this. Like, we all identified with subcultures and wore, I remember, like, the way I had carried my bag or the types of jeans everyone was wearing baggy, you know, like extra large and everything. And so we all experimented with that. But ultimately, as adults, you know, what young people look at us and say is boring is the fact that we no longer carry these signifiers of rebellion because we've actually realized their futility. And that is a really good lesson that you can express to your kids that say, hey, look, you're welcome to try your hair in some crazy thing, but I would actually take a look at, you might just be trying to draw attention to yourself that way. And there's probably something deeper, like you said, that we can examine about what is it you're seeing about the way your peers are thinking that is like, are you able to actually contain that you look at things differently without making a big theatrical piece about it? Because a lot of like the whole thing of wanting to appear like a rebel is like, we actually can't handle being a rebel. So we want to like slip into a role and get patted on the back
and not get too
like,
uncomfortable,
hey
though.
man, look at that cool guy. He's wearing a leather jacket and all
Right.
that, as opposed to going like, you know, truly thinking outside the box.
So
that makes sense 100% because what you're saying, it's the uniform. It's like, I remember when I was a kid growing up, the punk rock uniform. You could go and you could buy the studded jacket, you can buy the Doc Martens, you could buy the pants, you could have the whole uniform. But what you're saying is that's just a uniform. What's inside the shell? What's inside the brain? What's inside that person's heart? And like you said, to be a true rebel, you know, and I'll even use an example as bands when I was growing up. You know, the dude that dressed the punkest usually wasn't the most gnarliest guy on the scene. It was the dude that just showed up in the t-shirt and regular haircut, and he had the ideas and the thoughts that turned you on to different music and different people, and hey, I'm going to put out my own record. And you're like, wow. I mean, you know, you look at some of the people in the scene even that, you know, you and I wandered through, Ben, a lot of the people, you know, whether it was like an Ian MacKaye or something like that, they're just a guy, you know, t-shirt and jeans, but he has amazing thoughts and his brain is so, you know, amazing and rebellious. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that
And I guess what you're saying, I get what you're saying with the parents in the sense of with the pink nail polish and that particular thing is like, hey, you can do that and do it, but what about, you know, what does that really mean? You know, and obviously this mom, it was a young kid and you know, they might not be at that point in their life.
Yeah, but still, you know, it's kind of like the promise of perennial philosophy and of spirituality and all this deep inquiry that's occurred in mankind over the ages is that, including, you know, Buddhism, and so is that the manipulation of the physical world, of phenomena, it's never going to get you what you want. It's just not. It's just another, you're playing, I look at it as like you're decorating your prison cell. You know, we're all in these prison cells, and there are those amongst us that have become experts at decorating them in just all these fanciful ways, and they talk in interesting ways, and they have these outfits, and they've basically made the best. They've really settled. That's what I think, though. Instead of thinking of liberation, instead of thinking like, how do I actually break out of prison? Okay, they're basically going, let's just make the best of that we're in prison.
So a moment ago you said, I really am more interested in having my children be law-abiding citizens who are, you know, capable
radical
of
thinkers.
Radical thinkers. But to me, I don't know how those two things exist because so many of our current laws need to be challenged. And part of, I think, it's another source of, you know, fear control that we say, if you challenge the system, if you, whatever, don't follow the rules, then there's going to be a consequence. And to some extent, a person has to negotiate, okay, well, do I want my freedom to be limited by, if I challenge this, my freedom may be limited. And then will I really be able to do the work of challenging the system if I'm behind bars, just to take it to its extreme? So how do you as a parent, how do we as parents find that middle ground where first of all, we're encouraging them even to think about what it means to be a law-abiding citizen, and that laws are creations of, well, we're getting way philosophical in this particular episode, but also, to navigate our way through that. So to be a good person does not necessarily mean being law-abiding. To be a radical thinker, you may be abiding some laws, but not always. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. But I think the key is, look, this is a paradox that has been, explored for thousands of years. I think Jesus said it amazingly. We said, be in this world, but not of it. And I think the idea that to think for yourself, which is what was called awakening or enlightenment, has nothing to do with the system you're living in. And you can be going through understanding that we're here in, the Buddhists call it samsara, the Hindus call it maya. It's a world of illusion. It's a prison to some degree. But to win back your own mind is a totally internal process. Now, yes, there is a process of healing as a planet that we're undergoing, hopefully, but I believe that even those ideas stem from first actually winning back our own minds. So I think the urge to challenge the system, I went through this with my teenager a couple of years ago when she started going on these teenage sort of rants about, the environment and no one gets it and I just want to go and chain myself to a tree or, whatever. And I was like, well, look, first, what are you seeing in the outside world? You're seeing forces of greed, basically, right? I mean, that's really why people don't want, or complacency. First, conquer them in yourself. When you conquer them in yourself, you will know how to help others do it. If you try and start fighting this massive societal battle before you've dominated internally the forces that are the same forces you're seeing outside, you just become like, it's totally futile. It's like you become another parent yelling at your kid totally hypocritically when you don't even know what you're talking about.
Okay, so I agree 110%. Now, I'm a parent listening to this and I want to know, how does Ben Lee, how did you in that moment, in those probably variety of many discussions with your 15-year-old, or when she was 13 or whatever, how did you, so it's one thing to say, that's a big bomb to drop, like conquer them in yourself. I mean, if I'm her, I'm going, how? What do I do? Like, tell me just one thing I can do and I'll do it. So what would that be?
Observe yourself.
Okay.
Notice. I mean, again, this is where it comes into the faith I personally have that there's an intelligence at work within each of us that actually knows how to do this process. This is a process that I didn't invent it. I know, it's always existed. As long as there's been humans who could communicate, they've said, there's a process here, isn't there? And it's nothing that has to be taught. It's something that has to be accessed. So I believe if you are patient and you have a sincere questioning, it unfolds itself, So my interest isn't in dictating some step-by-step formula. I mean, this is a lot of what I see with, like, it's interesting, that we feel tempted into creating formulas as if it's that easy, whereas truly it's a process that we have to open up to and explore for ourselves. But if you like the idea of it, if you say, what if I start with myself? What if I stop worrying about all the corruption out in the world and start by dealing with my own hypocrisy? That intention is very powerful. And when you are hypocritical and you catch yourself being out of integrity, you'll notice it. And it's not going to feel good. And then you'll reflect on it and you'll think about it and you'll think, how could I have done that differently? Maybe you'll rectify it. Maybe you'll apologize, or maybe you'll say, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to handle that differently next time, because some things are very private, But I think all in all, it's something that is an experience.
Agreed. And I think that, my personal opinion, and there's many people out there that would not agree with this, but I think that we have moved over the last, I would say, 3,000 or so years, further and further away. Although I think we're starting to like come back and have this balance between like really extremely rational thought and something that is like back in connection with our internal selves. But I think the moment we put God, whatever that means to you, outside of ourselves, there's an objectification of God. Never mind all the dogma and the rules that come with that we have effectively given up. Like, I mean, we've moved about as far away from that spiritual experience, that internal voice or listening or contemplation as we could possibly move.
And that's why it's really important not to be arrogant in our explanation of the spiritual truths that we've perceived as adults towards our children, because they can smell it on us when we're speaking not from experience. So if you really ask me, what do you know to be true spiritually? Like, what have you really first-hand experienced? What I'll say to you is, there's something there.
And is that what you would say to your girls?
Yeah,
yes.
There's something there. It's like, I know there's something there. I'm not going to pretend I can fully map it out for you, but I'm also not going to pretend it doesn't exist.
Right.
There's something there, and that's enough.
Am I the only one? And I know people who are listening are just like, I want Ben Lee to be my dad. Like, I don't know how. I love my dad so much, and he listens to the podcast. But Dad, if you're listening, I know you want Ben Lee to be your dad. How? Yeah. Oh my gosh! Like, yes. I once again, we've had a good show when I don't talk, because I'm learning.
It was beautiful. And I want to say one other thing, just to kind of like just put a I don't know, something at the end of that last little back and forth, is when my little one, who's deeply inquisitive in a different way than my 20-year-old is, she has, because she hears her friends talk at school, and she came home, a few months ago and said, what do you think? What is God? What do you believe in God? And I said, when I think of God as a verb, not as a noun. And she had just in school learned about, so we had to kind of do a recap on verbs and nouns. But to me, it's like that keeps us in this space of experience instead of objectification. And it maintains a focus on the internal, what we come in with, and exploring that, as opposed to looking, just like materialism and consumerism and all of that, looking outside ourselves for that, back to the documentary where we started, for that sense of success and accomplishment, and instead turning inward and knowing that it all exists within ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
I just, I want to touch on two things before we split. Okay. The first thing I was just going to say, you mentioned your daughter, and I know you were talking about your stepdaughter. How was it coming in as a dad? Because we get a lot of questions from step parents. They're like, I have a stepdaughter or a stepson, and I'm a dad, or I'm on the mom's end. How did that like, was that like, at what age did you become stepdad? And then you've been with her from, what was it, from
like 4 turning 5.
Yeah.
So it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
It's a very unique role. In our particular case, her dad is super involved in her life. Like, they fully really co-parent.
Great.
So in a way that potentially makes it more complicated, because it's not like you're stepping into being a substitute father. You're filling in this whole other role. So I don't know. I've really enjoyed it. It's been an interesting and a challenging experience. I think I'm probably the person in her parenting kind of unit. Unit is what she calls us in our group text.
I love it.
Does she call it the parenting unit?
She just calls it unit. Unit.
Oh, so good.
But I think I'm probably the one in unit that has been as passionate and protective about her spiritual interests and her and so that's been a nice role to be able to assume. It's almost more like a godparent or something, to be able to have that conversation without the triggers of, like, with your own kids, you just get so crazy, and it's so much easier to see when that biology thing isn't there. You can just think so much more objectively. But I haven't been perfect. It's been a learning experience, and I continue to learn about how to give her access to possibility. I mean, truly, like,
if someone was listening right now, like a dad or a mom coming into a marriage, and they've been dating and they've been with this child, and all of a sudden, okay, it's official, I'm your stepdad. What would you say to that listener, in the sense of, what not to do, if there's two things you've learned, one thing to do and one thing not to do, what would be? We're very bare bones on this show.
Yeah.
You know, like...
Yeah, well... It's really hard. I'm not sure I have very good practical advice. I mean, it's funny. The thing that came into my mind is say hello to the kid. Like actually
acknowledge
there's an individual there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really looking forward to getting to know you, because
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
how
it's just-
I feel it.
yeah.
And I was reading again, I'm just on a roll here, but I've been reading a lot of Osho lately, and he talks about this idea of what a great benefit it is for children to have multiple people who, quote unquote, parent them, so that they have the opportunity to see a variety of role models. And when my oldest, my 20-year-old, when we were first sort of creating this, multiple parent family, right? She's got her dad is married, and so she basically has two sets of parents. And I said, what a beautiful thing that you have four people to love you and to learn from, as opposed to it being this, oh my gosh, my family has fallen apart. And she was 5 or 6 at the time. So from very early on, we talked earlier about that key age, this has been her reality. And I've always sort of framed it in this really beautiful, positive way, that it is an opportunity, not something that she's not lost out on having her two parents together forever. Instead, she's gained.
I think it's interesting because it's connected to where we started the conversation, which is also being in reality about the situation. And I think it can be both. I think we can live in the understanding that there is wreckage and that we have created wreckage in our lives, and we've brought children into that. And that's unfortunate. Yet we can have a positive attitude for the future.
What is the opportunity here?
Yeah, when I look at like the Dalai Lama is someone who I really respect, and it's interesting with Tibetan Buddhism because they spend like their whole days meditating on their own mortality and impermanence. And it can be quite depressing in a sense, yet they're some of the happiest people. And so I really believe there's something to be said for looking at the situation honestly and saying, you know what, in an ideal world, you would be with your mum and your dad in one family. There's nothing wrong with saying like, we actually weren't able to manifest the ideal situation at our current level of consciousness.
Agreed.
We just weren't able to do it. But from here on out, we're going to try and do the best we can do. And I think if we take this situation alchemically and use it to grow and to learn from each other and figure out how to do this together as a team, it can be a beautiful thing that we end up feeling grateful for.
We just can't do better than that.
Yeah, I think it has
Love
to
it.
end. Man, Ben Lee, thank you so much for being
What
a
a
part
pleasure.
of
Thanks for
Rad
having
Parenting.
me.
Did you enjoy it?
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We went in a second. That's how you know you're having fun.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much for taking the time, and I can't wait for on the music end, because I know you're working on a new record for everyone out there. When can we expect?
So I've got a record actually coming out in November. We're doing a super fast turnaround. It's called Freedom, Love, and the Recuperation of the Human Mind. I've got
I love that
Sarah
title.
Watkins and Grantley Phillips on it. It's a beautiful record. And I've got another band I've started with my friend Josh Radner, who's an actor. We have a band called Love Songs for God and Women. And that we're actually doing. When's this going to be up?
This will be up next. This will be up next week.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
when's the show?
on Friday.
The date?
Is it the 16th?
Yeah, it'll be 16th.
Oh, no, 26th.
26th.
We're playing at our first ever show at the Hotel Cafe, and
Oh,
then
right
again
down the street.
the following Friday again.
So
and then
do a
we're
little residency.
Yeah, just
Okay.
2 weeks, and then we're going to make an album. And yeah, it's just, I'm always just trying to stay creative and follow all these interesting threads and see where they go.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I got to say, when you played that one party where the first time I ever met
Yeah.
you, I was telling Anea, my son was there, and you just, you two had been talking, he's playing music, and then I will always remember you just going, hey man, do you want to play a song? And you totally like put him on the spot, and he was like, all right. And then it was just one of those moments. Like, I think I even have a photo of like him playing piano. And
Well,
like,
he did great.
You know?
And also, like, that's part of the thing as an artist. You sort of come to realize when it's literally just an invitation. Some
Yeah.
people are waiting
But
for
it was so cool. It was so cool because everyone was there to, hear you play your jams.
What a beautiful opportunity to invite Nate to just give us a little bit of yourself. Like,
Yeah.
would you mind? Would you be so kind?
It was
And
awesome.
I love it.
Awesome. Hey, I want to thank everyone for all the emails. They keep coming in, radparenting@gmail.com. Also, go to our page and you can check out our Facebook page. Yep, go to our Facebook page. Hit us a little like on there. And we've got a ton more guests coming up before the end of the year. And also, I want to let you guys know, too, we're going to have a big... we're doing a special end of the year. I haven't even told Anea about this, a giveaway type thing that we're going to do. And I'm really excited about it. So I'm working on that. And I want to thank everyone once again for all of those reviews on iTunes. That's amazing.
We love them.
Yeah. And it always gets us in front of more people. I always feel bad at the end, go and review us on iTunes, but it only turns more people onto the show. With that said, we are going to split. Ben Lee, thank you so much. You'll come back and hang out again?
Yeah, man, anytime.
Please.
I'll bring my wife next time. She's got good things to say.
Oh, that would be great. Let's just
Can we do that?
before he leaves the building. Let's get it on the
Okay, we'll hook it
calendar.
up. And we have a tradition at the end is where we say, all right, and then before we bail, we say late. We say as in later. So you ready?
You can participate. We're writing you.
I'm going to point at you. I'm going to cue you.
Okay,
You ready?
I was gonna say
All right, so this is Joe Sib.
And Anea Bogue.
And for Rad Parenting, we're out of here.
Late.